how to make an animated map chart like this for the web. In this video, I will show you how you can create this using HTML, CSS, Tailwind and a framework. I will use Svelte and SvelteKit, but the concepts will be the same for any framework, so you can use React or any other if you want. What we're looking at now is a design file in Figma, and I have prepared a couple of colors, as you can see here to the left. Before I do the actual implementation in code, I will give you a visual tour where I describe how I plan to build the page. So to begin with, I will begin with wrapping the entire page in a large flexbox that will be a column. After that, I will add a gradient, as you may have noticed in the background. I did specify a background color here, which I'm using as the background, but I also have these diagonal strokes, as you can see. And so I will add that as a second step. And here is the specification for that gradient. Then I will start working at the headers. So there are three texts: animated map chart and Choropleth map. I think this is the more correct name for this kind of chart. Now I will wrap this inside a vertical flexbox, this green box here, and have different alignments for the texts. So start, center and end. To make the width of the flexbox as wide as the widest child, I will use inline flex for the green one, and different styling will be used for the different texts. Now when we have the page and the headers prepared, it's time to begin with the actual chart. And so in my case, I'm doing a chart of Sweden. In your case it might be different, but to have some kind of specification for the different borders of the map, I got this from Wikipedia, and this is a map of Svenska län, it's called, different parts of Sweden basically. And so what I did next when I had that image was that I needed to draw the different regions, and I did that here in Figma. So with the normal pen tool, I mapped out manually all the regions. I only did vertical or horizontal lines. So if we zoom in here, you can see that all the borders of this region are only vertical or horizontal. I did that because when we do the different regions that are neighboring each other, we want them to align perfectly. If you see here, when I select the neighbors, they align with each other. And I think that's easier to accomplish in that way. Now, so I did that for all the regions, and when I was done, I had something like this. So this is what it looked like when it's finished, and you might notice that it looks like it has some kind of spacing between the areas, and that is actually just a stroke on each region. So if I select this and disable the stroke, you can see that the spacing disappears. So I added a stroke that have the same color as the background to get that effect. Now, when we have all the regions, we will in the future, when we do the code, we will need to position them correctly so it looks like our map. And so the question is, how should we do that? What I can think of is that we could in some way position them absolutely in the CSS, and we of course want the map to scale with different screen sizes and such. So if we were to position them absolutely we would have to use percentages as the units, but it would still be quite tedious to do all the parts and specify the exact position. So my solution was that I added a frame for each region of the map, and I can show you what that looks. So the trick is that all the regions have the same frame. So if I move a region out here and then another one, you can see that they have the same frame, but the content inside the frame are positioned differently. But that means when we export the image or SVG and then put them on top of each other, the outer measurements of the image will be the same, but the content will be positioned differently. But they will align perfectly in the browser, and that also takes care of all the resizing and such, since we are using the IMG component. Now, we also want each part of the map to be able to show different colors for different values. And so in some way we'll need to control each part and give it a color. So what I did to do that was I duplicated all the parts and then gave them the final color, let's say the 100% color. The plan is that in the browser I will have them on top of each other and then modulate the opacity of the pink part. So let's say some have opacity of 50, 20 and so on. And by doing that we get the effect that we had on the final design with different opacities. So by changing the opacity we can get a continuous color between the dark blue and the pink. And if that is done correctly, it should give us the final result. And this should also be animated. So my plan is that the change of state of the pink color or the pink parts, I will use the CSS transition property for them, and that will give a smooth change between the opacities, and that should animate the entire graph. Alright, so I will set up the project now, and as I said I will be using Svelte and SvelteKit. I can show you the setup that I will do. So here I have the colors, the ones that I showed you before, and I will follow the standard SvelteKit setup and then the Tailwind setup. And in my Tailwind configuration file I will use some kind of preferred values with a different screen size and colors and font size, and here are those. Then in my app CSS file, which will be the kind of global CSS file for the app, I will use Montserrat as a font, which I get from Google APIs. And I will import the Tailwind classes and also make some modification to the HTML element to set the correct background and font and color of the text. And to make that actually have effect on the website, I will import that CSS in the layout Svelte file. Alright, so let's start. I will, as I said here in the steps, I will wrap the entire content in a flexbox. So in Svelte, in a layout, the children will be added where the slot element is. So I will wrap this inside a div and then make this a flex and flex column. Now this should be, we want all the elements to be centered, so we do items center, and that looks all right. I also want some padding to the top, so I'll say padding top and then maybe 6. And that looks good, I think. Now if we go back to the page, we will create this headers wrapper. So we do a div and then class flex call. Actually, this should be the flex inline flex. And the first text should be animated with the capital letters. And this should be, the text should be the pink one. And in my config file that is named strong, since it is the strong pink. So something like that, and then font bold, and then italic. Now that's good. It's too big. In my config file I had 3 sizes of the text. So I had content, text header, and header was the biggest one. But I think text header is alright for this one. Something like that. And now we make the next. So this was map chart, and that was actually a gradient. If we look carefully here, we can see that it begins with this brighter kind of pinkish blue, but then it fades to the really dark blue. So I will need to do a text gradient for that. So I remove this and then add this. So this says the text should be transparent and background should clip to the text, and then how the gradient should lay out, and then from color to color. And so we need to look what colors we actually had. So the left one was this hex code, and so I paste that in, and the right one was this one, something like that. So we open Chrome again, and it looks to be correct. I need to remove the italic, then make this a header. That looks fine. And then we also had the last one, the real name of this chart. So we copy that, or Choropleth Map. So open Chrome again. This should be in the blue, so I think I name that dark. And then this can be just content size without italic, and then maybe regular, like that. And we can see that there are quite some spacing between each text. So to remove that, we can do a leading none on all of them actually. So leading none, none, and none. And now they are more together. And the last one should have end align, something like that. That looks alright. Now one thing I forgot to do was to add this gradient background. So I did this gradient in Figma and mixed a couple of colors, and it looks nice. But one thing we can do to make it easier to actually get this into code is to go into this code section and then to copy the linear gradient that Figma generates for us. And now in the layout we can add a div. So let's say something like that, or actually we could put that outside the flexbox. So div, and close that. We can give that an ID, so maybe gradient. And now we can style it. So in Svelte it's quite nice because we can just add styling in the file. So I will do that. And set the background to this linear gradient that we got from Figma. And we can see how it looks now. We don't see anything. So this should be absolute positioned, so absolute, and it should be top, left, right, bottom, and so on, 0. So top 0, right 0, left 0, bottom 0. And now we can see it. And one problem that we have is it is in front of our content. So to solve that, we can give it a negative Z index. So let's say -10. And that solved our problem. And that works good. Alright, so now we need to create the actual component for the chart. I like to create a folder for our components. So let's say new folder, so components, and then a subfolder for this component. And I like to use smaller letter for the first one on folders. So let's say map chart, and then the component map chart.svelte. Now, if we go back to the planning here, we have done this. These parts are only in Figma, since these are the drawings, and we have done them. So we need to create some kind of parent that can display these images, and I imagine that we need a div, and we need to give this some size. So let's say width maybe 300 pixels, and then the height, we want this to exactly match our exported images, or we haven't exported them yet, but the images that we will have. And so I think if we look at them and we see their height and width, we can see we can get the aspect ratio. So 189 divided by 443, and we get a value. So if we copy that and say aspect, and this custom value, and then make sure it's a dot here, and we can remove a couple of decimals, something like this maybe. And to see that it actually works, we can do a temporary background color. So let's say background green, and then we add this component to the page. So map chart, and then open Chrome. Alright, so we can now see it. It's here, and it seems like our aspect thing worked. Now I want to have some kind of margin between these two, and what I like to do is to create some kind of just spacer div. So let's say div, close that, and then class height, and let's say maybe 100 pixels. That looks alright. Maybe we should do it a bit smaller, like that. So we have our component here, and we want the children of this to be absolute positioned, and they should be absolute positioned in relation to this parent. And so we make this relative, and that should be fine. Now we will have two different images or SVGs, the blue one and the pink one, and they should be on top of each other. So I think we should maybe create a component that have the blue and pink for each region. So I do that, and I can call it maybe region svelte. And we will need to access each part of the country in my case, and we will need to adjust the value or opacity for each part individually. So as you can see here, for these drawings, I have named each region with a certain key. So I begin from 0, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then do the alphabet, so A to N, and this is my keys or IDs for each region, and it's the way that I access them. Now we want to display them, so we haven't exported them yet, so I think it's time to do that. So I'm select all of them and then go to export and make sure it's in SVG, and then so I will create a new map inside the project called images, and inside that I will have one map for the blue ones and one map for the pink ones. So let's say blue on this one, and then save, and then we can see if it was correctly done. Well, under blue we see all the SVGs here, and then we do the same for the pink one. So if we go to the pink one and then select all of them as before, make sure it's SVG and then export, and now we go back to images, a new map, call it pink, and then save, and then we can verify that it worked. So images blue and pink. Alright, so that's good. So in our region component we want to show the region, and this will need some kind of prop to specify what region it should display. And so I will create a prop for that, and in Svelte we do it in the script tag, so script, and I use TypeScript, and then export let key, which is a string, like that. And we need to display the image, so the img element, close that with a source, and we did put them in images, so slash images slash blue, and then slash, and then we use the key and .svg, since all of them are SVGs. Now we can add an alt tag for this to describe what it is we're looking at, so part of Sweden, maybe for my case. We also want to give this some styling, so maybe width 100%, height 100%, and that should be alright. Now if we go back to the map chart and open this and close it, and then add our region component, so region, close that and give it a key, So let's just say 0 for example. And we open Chrome to see if this works. So we can see this region, which is good. And if we change the key, let's say if we actually... Alright, so it changed. So let's say 9, C, B. It seems to work, and that's good. Now, the keys that we specified, we want to display all the parts of the country at once. So I'm thinking that we maybe should iterate over a list of all our keys. And our keys are in a certain protocol. So I like to, when I create interfaces and stuff like that, I like to create a file called protocols. So let's say protocols.ts and then export const region keys. And we have from 0 to 9 and then letters. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N. And we can check. Let's see, we have 2 N, so that looks all right. And we go back to the chart component, and we create an iterator. So in Svelte we can use the each. So now we can loop over all the keys. So region keys as key, and close the loop. So each, and then since the prop name and this name are the same, we can just use this syntax. And need to close it, and that should be all right. Now we don't see anything. All right, as we can see, they are stacking on top of each other. So I forgot one thing, and that is they need to be absolutely positioned. So absolute, and now we can see everything. And we also want to modulate between different colors between the dark blue and pink. So on top of this, also absolute positioned, I will add the pink one. So I add the path here to pink, and now we can only see the pink ones. But we want to change the opacity of the pink. So let's say export let opacity and then number, and let's say we want to change the opacity of this one, and we will do that during runtime. So actually I think instead of passing that as a prop, I will pass that as a CSS prop and modify the opacity of this with normal CSS. So I will add a class to this. So let's say just pink might be enough, and then add some style tags. So style, and then pink, and then opacity. And to access the CSS prop that I will define, I will use var and then opacity, if I name it opacity, and then I go back and define that. So opacity, and let's say just for test 0.5, and that looks like it works fine. So 1, But now we want this to change, so we can see how it animates between states. And we will need to pass data to this map chart component. And for each region we will have the key value as a string, and we will also want a value that represents how much whatever we are measuring is for this region. And so I think we should define an interface for this. So in the protocols files we can add export interface and then maybe region data, and that should have a value, so a number and a key. And so this map chart should get the data through a prop. So I make this TypeScript so we can use types and create a prop. So maybe just chart data. Actually, it should be let here as well, and then a region data and an array of those, since we want data for all of them. And now we want to iterate over this instead, so over this and then data, and then we can get the key from the data. And then the question is, all right, now the names aren't the same, so we need to specify a key here. And we can remove this and move type outside. Now, what should the opacity be? We can't really use data.value here, since we don't know the range. We don't know the range of value. I mean, we could measure something that aren't between 0 and 1. It could be, you know, the number of people or anything else. And so we need to normalize this value in, so it becomes in the range of 0 to 1. And we want to divide this value of the maximum value it could be. And then the question is, what is the maximum? Well, the maximum is the biggest one in the data set. So for each new data that we get, we want to find that. And this maximum value needs to update for each new data that we get. And in Svelte we can do reactive statements with the $sign syntax. So something like this. And we create a variable called max value. And to find the maximum value of the chart data, we can do a math.max. But the chart data isn't an array of numbers, so we need to fix that. And we could fix that by with a mapping. So if we take chart data and do a map of that, and we get each element, so we call each element data, and we return the value of data. Now this should be an array of numbers, and it still doesn't work, but we need to use the spread operator for this syntax to work. And this should be the maximum value for our data set. And so if we divide this by the maximum value, it should always have an input, opacity input of 0 to 1. Since if it is the biggest value, then it's divided by itself and it's 1. And if it's smaller than the biggest value, it becomes less than 1 but bigger than 0. Alright, now nothing is rendered, and that's because we haven't provided any data to the page. So now we need to create the data that should be shown. So let's say const generate data, and this should return the type, but we need to specify TypeScript here first. So region data and an array of that, and we do a return. Now the string of our keys will tell us the number of elements we need in this array, and they also give us the key. So I'm thinking if we do a map over those, so key, or actually region keys, but now this isn't actually an array, it's a string. So to be able to do a map of this, we need to spread this and then do a map and get the key, and inside this one we do a return, and this should be the type of region data, and we could say that the value, let's say that the value ranges between 0 and 1000. It could be whatever, but for our case that works fine. So we do a math.random, which generates a number between 0 and 1, and we multiply that by 1000 to get it in the correct range. Now this should work, but if you want it to be an integer, we could do a rounding as well, so math round and wrap it inside that. And the key, we already have it since it was provided here in the map, so we can just do it like that. Now I think that's alright, so let's create a variable that keeps this data. So let's say chart data equals to, and then run the function. And then to make sure that this data get updated, we create an interval, so set interval, and give an anonymous function. We can say that this interval should run every 500 milliseconds, and in this function the chart data should reassign, and since this relies on randomness, the result should be different on each reassign. And I think that was it. So if we pass this to the component, and we can now say that each region gets updated every 500 milliseconds with new data. So we give it to the map chart. The map chart takes the array, it iterates over it, it creates all the regions with key and the CSS prop, and the value is correctly scaled with the max value, which we got from the max function. And in the region we have the base dark blue, and then a pink on top, and this pink uses this class which changes its opacity with the CSS prop. And alright, so that looks fine, but we also want this to be animated between the states, so we can add a transition, and that seems to do the job. But we also want to maybe have a longer duration between, or make the animation longer. So let's say duration 300, something like that. That looks alright. But now we have this ugly green background, so we can remove that. So let's remove that, and it looks alright. So if we make this a bit bigger, it looks like we hoped for. So if we go to the original design and compare, it is what we expected. Alright, so I think that was it for this video. Thank you for watching, and yeah, bye.